Good evening, and welcome to the radio show. This is my own personal story as to how I found meaning and what it is that I actively do to become a stronger, healthier, wiser person. So, I want to say this at the beginning that this is not clinical advice. My story is not your story, and only you can know what's happening in your life to be able to take action and understand what it is you need in order to go out into the world and be the best version of yourself that you can be. So I'm not trying to provide any kind of direct one-on-one guidance. This is just me sharing my story with all of you so you guys can take what you will from it and just get another perspective on how I engage with life. So with that said, this video, as mentioned in the title, is all about how I found meaning, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So this video is all about, as you can tell from the title, is all about how I found meaning in my life in a period of pure hopelessness, and I hope you guys find it inspiring and enjoyable. So with that said, I'm going to begin, not from like the very beginning of conception, but when things started taking a downturn. So when I was really young, I was very full of life, full of energy, and viewed the world in this very excited way. I found things to be very exciting and new and fresh, the way I'm sure a lot of us do when we're children. We look at the world and we look at everything and we're just like, wow, this is a new experience. This is fresh. This is exciting. I want to engage with it. And depending on your home life situation, that could be a really great thing or a really terrible thing if your guardians are very controlling over what it is that you experience. But for me in my household, I wouldn't necessarily say my household was perfect by any means, but I could absolutely tell that both of my parents loved me and my sister, and they absolutely did the best they could raising both of us, and I am forever appreciative and grateful of that. Now, with that said, it doesn't come without its challenges and nuances. Of course, in my life, there was a lot of fighting in the household, and I didn't know how to approach that, so I stayed away from it. I became detached in some key ways. And I'm going to circle back to that later. But I never really liked engaging with conflict. I was always kind of the avoidance type. And about halfway through elementary school, I started developing this anxiety. What if I didn't get my homework done? I'm going to be disciplined, and I don't like being disciplined. Being disciplined means pain, whether it's emotional or physical or whatever the case is. It's scary. And I didn't enjoy that feeling of being disciplined. So I lived very much under the radar, but I felt that anxiety constantly building, especially in elementary school, where if I felt a tremendous amount of energy if I didn't get all of my homework done, ready to turn in the next day, I would walk with my mom to school, and then I would walk back to the house and then walk back again to school, not to pick anything up from the house, but just to walk off that excess anxiety. And that became very terrifying. And I was able to hold on to this anxiety throughout middle school, where bullying really started reaching a new height. And same thing with high school. I kept that anxiety along the way with constant bullying, but I started developing more of a backbone, especially in my later years of high school. But that being said, I was just holding on to this consistent anxiety. And by high school, I also started getting episodes of depression. I started realizing that I really desperately wanted to fit in, but also engage with my interests. And my interests, especially at that time, were focused all around music. Because I didn't really care for socializing with a ton of other people, I spent all of my time in the choir classrooms. I was a part of 3 choirs throughout most of my years in high school, 2 of them throughout all of them at least. And I just devoted my entire life to music in high school especially. And then when I went on to college, I joined this a cappella group where I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. This is like a family of people that I can really spend time with. And also by this time, especially in college, I detached myself even further away from my family. Like they still loved me and cared for me and provided for me, but emotionally there was this disconnect at that time. I still existed in my own world, and I had no real self-awareness at that time either. The actions I was committing to were only for my self interest. You know, if I liked someone, regardless if they were in a relationship, not necessarily I would pursue them, but I would create a relationship with them. I would, in the back of my mind, always hope for something more, but never really acted on it because, on one hand, that's awful and rude, and I was at least aware of that. But on the other hand, I never really understood what my actions were actually doing. And I was very obvious in what it was that I was doing looking back on it in retrospect. But, you know, I'm not really subtle. I express who I am as a person very naturally. But that being said, that's what a persona is. The Latin root of personality is persona, which is a mask. It's the mask that we not only show other people, but the mask we show ourselves. The kind of person that we ultimately choose to be, whether it's consciously made or somewhat molded by our subconscious. And it wasn't until like my third or fourth year that I actually started realizing that I was really detested by my a cappella group. And I only really made one true close relationship with someone in that group. Not just because they were in my group, but in a lot of my classes as well. She was also a music major in performance, and I was as well. So we got to perform together, we got to hang out a lot, and we've had a very tumultuous relationship in our last 12 going on 13 years of knowing each other. But with all of that said and done, she is still one of the closest people to me in my life, and I am so deeply appreciative of her. And with all of that said, the moment I graduated college, I was working a job at Starbucks, and one of my coworkers brought his girlfriend in. And I thought nothing of her. You know, I'm like, oh, cool, it's a buddy's girlfriend. But I really don't want to meet her or anything like that. I'm not really a sociable person like that. It was also at this time when there was a break from that girl that was a part of my a cappella group in all of my classes. We'll call her Carrie for the sake of this story. So Carrie, to this day, still is someone really close to me. But at the time, we, again, up and down, and that time it was a down, and there was a period of 5 years where we didn't communicate with each other. We honestly thought that we would never talk to each other again after a certain incident, but it's more of a buildup that led to a break at that time. But there was a period of 5 years where I was just off doing my own thing, just kind of working at Starbucks to pay the bills, but ultimately I was getting ready to launch my career in opera. And I met this girl, and I met my friend's girlfriend. She was really sweet, but again, didn't think anything of her. And because my coworker and I were talking a lot, she was present with a lot of those things as well. And there was a lot of moments where we started building a decent rapport, but there was this weird force that was kind of pushing us together. And I can't really explain it, but it didn't feel romantic or lustful or anything, but it did feel like something was very wrong. And I had a very similar feeling like when I was in my a cappella group, and I tried to push away from it. But then she came to me as a point of refuge, saying that my coworker was not being good to her. And me wanting to be protective, sat down with her and wanted to see if there was anything that I could do to help remedy the situation. But it was also at that moment that I started recognizing that this might not be based out of pure protection. Do I have any feelings for this person? And over time, I started recognizing that there were, and I didn't want there to be, but emotions don't work logically. That's why they're emotions. And eventually, she broke up with him because of the way that he was treating her, or at least the way that she told me she was being treated. And shortly thereafter, we got together. And I created a pact with myself that said, I'm going to try to be the absolute best boyfriend I can be, supportive, caring, loving, just present. And the relationship itself was, like many relationships that begin, was great for the first several months, even first year. But then warning signs became much more present. There was something very important about it. And over time, she actually started becoming a rival where when we spent time together, it started getting to the point of, I wonder what we're going to fight about today. And I just did not enjoy fighting. I did not want to argue with her over anything. And I tried to be as malleable as possible, but it got to a point where the way that I put a cup down on a table would agitate her, and cause an all-out end of the world fight. And I didn't know how to navigate that kind of dynamic. And it wasn't just about the fighting, although that is an element that helped build to this point, but it was also being physically abused. It was about her cheating on me. It was about X, Y, and Z. And for the sake of this argument, we'll call this person Mary. And Mary was just so difficult to engage with. And in the back of my mind, I tried everything to keep the relationship going, even though that was the absolute worst thing I could have done. When I first got cheated on, I should have just ended it there. But no, I did everything I could because of the pact I made. I'm going to be the best boyfriend I can be. And if I can take a certain level of abuse from the life that I've lived so far, I can take abuse from this. I can find ways to make this work, get around it. I'm going to do everything I can to maintain whatever happiness I am clearly blinding myself to. And with my rose-colored glasses, I deeply tried to find any opportunity to save the relationship, even though I was getting hit, even though the emotional abuse was intense. And I was experiencing extreme bouts of depression during this time, which did not mix well with me trying to perform my best. So the relationship ultimately ended the day after Christmas in 2021. And I was just so hollow. The relationship was extended by a year and a half. So all in, it was 2.5 years. And that was the moment that I learned what a bittersweet feeling meant, where the moment the relationship ended, it was done through a phone call, which feels awful, but neither of us really wanted to see each other. And I felt this immense wave of freedom hitting me, but this immense restriction and this jailed feeling of, well, now I'm empty. I feel like a shell because I invested everything into this relationship. All of my resources, financially, physically, doing everything I could to help her, to support her, to go out into the world and provide for her and me. And I was working 60, 80-hour weeks, sometimes 100. And I was working 2 jobs, and those jobs were extraordinarily demanding. And I just poured everything into that relationship. And the moment it ended, I felt free, but also jailed at the same time. And it was really the first time I felt this overwhelming, bittersweet feeling. And for 10 months, where I've spoken about this, not in as much detail, but with other people, and they said, wow, 10 months, that's pretty short. And I can somewhat agree to that, but for me, it was just 10 months of me literally, and I use the word literally in its literal sense, literally face down in the floor, under my bed, with my nose pressed against the floor for for several days in those 10 months. And I did that for hours at a time. And I was just so hollow. I really couldn't take any action for myself. And it was just so miserable during that time. I had no direction. My depression was at an all-time high. My anxiety was at an all-time high. I felt numb to everything, not just emotionally, but physically. There was no sensation happening. And by this time, even though I had already stopped being an alcoholic, I turned to marijuana just to kind of take the edge off a little bit. And that was something that I thought that I really, really needed at that time. And what ended up happening was when I was that shell, all I did was just barely get enough energy just to eat food, watch a video on YouTube, and just sulk in my misery. This really self pitiful kind of environment. And I just hated it. I hated being in that state of just nothing. I was just floating in this abyss. And then I saw a video from a reactor. He was reacting to a show that I've loved throughout my entire life, which is Avatar The Last Airbender. I watched it when it premiered in 2004 or 2005, somewhere there. And that show has stuck with me throughout my life. And I absolutely love that show. And he was reacting to it. But he wasn't just a reactor. He also talks a lot about his life experiences and the lessons he's learned and what it is that he's actively engaging with and what it is he's actively doing and talking about philosophy. And it was really, really interesting and insightful just watching this man live a life that I found envious at the time, which is just to be free, unfettered, not be tied down by a job necessarily, but just kind of go out into the world and engage with it like a playground. And it was so dazzling to me that someone could live their life so freely, but not get caught up in financial wealth or the pursuit of money necessarily. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the pursuit of money, but if your sole purpose is the pursuit of money and not how you're going to cultivate it into really good things for either yourself or the people around you, then the pursuit of money it's a very fickle thing, and it requires a lot of nuance and requires a deep nuanced perspective to really understand how it is one actually feels about and manifests that kind of financial vision. But I digress. Going back to the main point, he was really inspiring to me. And the more I kept watching his reaction videos, not just in Avatar, but in other things as well, I started getting more of a control of my life. I started becoming a lot more self-aware of who I was as a person and why it is that I felt so empty. And I started breaking everything down. This relationship took everything out of me. I put all of my eggs in one basket and the basket is gone. So I can either feel self-pity as the shell, or I can view this as an extraordinary opportunity to rebuild myself, not exist on this shifting sand of, I need other people to like me, so I'm going to take on their political views. I'm going to take on their religious views. I'm going to ensure people like me by fitting into their mold. And instead, I said, well, let me first view what it is that I need to do in order to become strong again, not be empty. So at the end of my relationship with Mary, she was really good at throwing everything that I confided in her right back at me. All of my insecurities and fears, she just threw right back in my face. And a lot of that was, you aren't academically intelligent, so you're not stimulating in that way. And you're only working, you're not reading, you're not growing in any way. You're just stagnant. You're this nothing. And you're not moving outside of your comfort zone in all of these other areas of life. And I needed that in a key way, which on the outside might feel like abuse. And to a certain degree, I guess it is, because she was using it maliciously. She was weaponizing it. But upon reflection, it actually gave me a wake-up call as, yes, these are my insecurities. These are the things that have been shackling me into stagnancy. So I came to a point where I could just look at myself, be alone with my thoughts, and say, I'm going to be strong enough to be able to sit alone with myself. I'm going to be strong enough to not feel crushed by the weight of the world. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be so strong that even if I lost everything, I am never going to be put in this compromising position again. I am going to find a way to maintain strength and look at the world through a beautiful, realistic lens and ensure that I am never crushed by another person or by circumstances again. I will always find hope and a way through it. And with that mentality, I was able to break through a lot of my self-destructive thoughts and I was able to actually create this idea of I'm going to turn my weaknesses into strengths and my strengths into specialties. And the fewer weaknesses that I have, the fewer opportunities I'm giving anybody else in the world who's trying to get a one up on me. I'm going to give them few opportunities to take advantage of me because I am so strong and powerful in my own regard. I've built this power and strength for myself. And I was actually beginning to not just respect myself, but to amass power for myself, amass strength, and to ensure that I wouldn't be in that compromising position again. So what ended up happening is I started reading books, many books. The first book that I remember reading and actually enjoying it, because I hated reading throughout my life. It was always irritating and I much preferred to play video games. But when I actually started reading, I started enjoying it. It wasn't just a headache. It wasn't just required. It was something that I really wanted to do. And the first book that I picked up was some random book that fell into my lap, but proved to be extraordinarily meaningful to me, which was Awakening the Buddha Within by Lama Surya Das. And that helped me create a stable structure, at least. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Buddhist by any means, but like in life, there are many aspects of certain moments in time that helped structure me the way that I am, whether it's personal encounters, something I've read, something I've engaged with in terms of the media, or a life experience. But this book is one of those things. And it helped me get to one of the places that I wanted to be in, which is I want to be able to detach myself from anything that could crush me. And I don't want to be crushed. I never wanted to be put in that compromising position again. So this book was focused on one man's journey from being a Westerner and enjoying the rather not necessarily bourgeois, but the Western society of what it's like to live in the West. And he traveled east. He put his absolute all into becoming a Buddhist and what that meant for him, because that's what his journey has led him to. And he was just talking about what it is that he has learned throughout his experiences and travels. And with that, there came a point where when I was reading through the book, it was talking about how to liberate yourself from suffering and the path towards awakening the inner Buddha, where all of us have these sleeping Buddhas and you just need X, Y, and Z in order to really bring forth that inner light, that enlightenment. That enlightenment is possible for all of us, etc. And whether or not you really want to internalize that in some deep, profound, meaningful way, or you just see that as more pseudoscience stuff. Regardless, the wisdom that I gained from his life experiences and what it is that he has experienced in his life and what it is that I can take from that is it was very refreshing for me personally to be able to read about you don't need to fully love someone and give your absolute all into someone or something if what you truly love is your hobby or your career or something in order to gain meaning from it. Existing in the present moment and truly loving what it means to be in the present moment was so profound and beautiful to me. So as I was reading through the book, I started encountering words that I've never encountered before. I didn't know what they meant, and I'm like, I should probably know what these mean, because one of the other insecurities that Mary threw in my face was the fact that I'm academically not intelligent. And I wanted to, again, transition that weakness into a strength, so I started writing down the words on flashcards. And to this day, with the books I read, I still encounter words that I've never seen before, and I write them on a flashcard and I put them in my phone in alphabetical order, so I make sure that I'm not repeating words. And I am now approaching 1,100 words, and I have learned over 200 of those words. and incorporate them into my vocabulary as often as I can. Obviously, there are some words in there that I don't get the opportunity to use a lot of in day to day conversation. And whenever I do use those words, I usually follow it up with the actual definition of the word. Like if I say something is Machiavellian, for example, which means cunning, scheming, or unscrupulous, then I'll say, yeah, this is really Machiavellian and really just this underlying scheming nature, something that is a parallel to the word so people understand the context of the word of which I am saying. So, with all of that out of the way, I started feeling more strength in that. I started feeling, wow, I'm really building myself into a stronger person because I'm learning more. I'm growing my vocabulary. I'm going out of my way to read and to actually engage with people and to enjoy the present moment, which is more than I've ever done in my life to begin with. And it was just so powerful and beautiful to me that I was able to dig myself out of my own anxieties, my own depression, and just take matters into my own hands, take action for myself to get to a better place. And beforehand, I had tried going to therapy, and I'm not saying that therapy is a bad thing, but with the therapists I had, they were not good for me. They didn't really listen to me. And when they did, it just felt like they weren't listening to me and I couldn't really connect with them. It was more like they were just someone there to give me advice. It wasn't really the relationship that I really wanted in terms of what I needed from a therapist, which was something more along the lines of the character Robin Williams portrayed in Good Will Hunting. I wanted that kind of rapport, that kind of connection with someone, because I didn't have that in my life at that time. And when I started becoming a lot stronger of a person, I reached back out to Carrie, and the 5-year time lapse had ended. It took a minute to warm back up, but it almost felt so natural to warm back up. And we just immediately took off running again. And we just felt such a strong rapport. And even though we've still had ups and downs, we're just so close. And as of right now, she is the closest person I know in my life, just because, she's seen me at my worst and was still there for me. And I do my best to be there and be as supportive and caring as I can for her as well. And even though the state of our relationship is a very bizarre one and a very unique one, that of which I'm not really going to go into great depths on, at least for this video, it's one that I can proudly say is one built to be extremely durable and sturdy, where we can absolutely trust and depend on each other, to be honest with each other, to not feed each other BS, to actually go out into the world and be caring, truly supportive, and present for each other. And something that she and I say to each other a lot is, I appreciate our similarities and I appreciate our differences. The way that I see the world is completely different than how she sees the world and engages with it. And whenever we say, I appreciate our differences, it lets the other person know that we actually really do love the fact that we are different as people. And that when we do engage with each other, that even though we are two different people, we really do appreciate the differences, the nuances that make the things that make us us. And to know that we deeply appreciate those differences, not just our similarities, but our differences, it lets us grow even further as people, especially as we continue to change and evolve. Like for me, it's really important that I'm constantly growing, that my views on something are absolutely subject to change should a certain level of evidence be provided to me, and the way that I internalize it actually transitions into something that fits for me in that moment. There's a quote by author Elbert Hubbard, who had a woman write to him and say, I disagree with you on all of these things, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote back to her saying, I don't entirely agree with it myself. Something I wrote yesterday might not necessarily appeal to me today, so I am curious to learn what you think on the subject. And that really sparked this beautiful thought within me, which I have internalized, which is, I don't need to be stubborn in every element of my life in order for me to be stable and secure as a person. As long as I am principled in who I am and never falter in the construction that I built for myself, I'm going to be okay. And that was when I picked up this life-changing book. This book is called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, Viktor Frankl is a concentration camp survivor and psychologist, psychoanalyst. The first half of the book regales us with his incredibly detailed and horrifying experience going to concentration camps and the humanity that you get tastes of while in such a place of tremendous despair. And it's incredibly poignant and beautiful. And in the second half of the book, he talks about his findings and his personal studies as to what it means in order to find meaning in one's life. And by the end of the book, he calls these searches for meaning and what it means to actually have a meaning your life's task. And I use that constantly in my life. And even though it's being tweaked and changed, my life task is still fundamentally exactly what it was when I first developed it, because I haven't lost sight of the vision of what it is that I set out to achieve, what it is that I've actually clearly defined to be my life's task. And this took me a long time to sit with myself, reflect, to meditate, to actually come into myself, to figure out who I am as a person and what it is that I want to achieve. And it came to a point where my life's task is to be an arbiter, to be able to settle disputes, not from a position of pure bias, but to be able to understand other people, to be able to peer into another person's eyes and experience some of the hardship they've had in their life with the position that they hold in terms of how they engage with religion and politics and X, Y, and Z elements of life that many people have an opinion on. And I want to be able to understand that person's point of view and go to a person who has antithetical values or opposing values and be able to sit down with them and talk with them and not immediately create this defensive aura because I'm someone who exists in the opposite tribe that they're warring against. And I don't want to war against people. I want to be able to find commonalities and not immediately trigger this fight or flight response with defensive action because I'm an enemy, but rather exist as more of a neutral party where I can truly understand what person A is thinking and feeling and experiencing and be able to communicate that in a less hostile way because I'm not a part of that person's tribe. I can understand it and be able to translate it towards a person of an antithetical tribe and be able to find commonalities and hopefully tie bridges together where there weren't any to begin with. And to be able to influence others with this kind of action of going out into the world and listening to people, having people share their stories, share their experiences with me, why it is they think the way they think or believe what they believe or engage in what they engage with, then I can get a better idea as to who they are truly as a person and what makes them truly happy and what makes them truly irritated and agitated about others, about society, etc. And I can internalize that in a way that actually makes sense to me. And through another book by Charles Duhigg called Super Communicators, who also wrote The Power of Habit, which is another incredible book, I was able to learn how to communicate well. I was very introverted as a person. I did not like being social. I was really embarrassed with who I was as a person. And I didn't like being with others. It made me uncomfortable, and socializing with others made me uncomfortable. And I felt stronger when I was alone, and I was able to recoup a lot of my energy by being alone. And I convinced myself that I am a full introvert, that I am not sociable, so I'm just not going to be sociable. I leaned on that as an excuse to not be sociable. And when I really cultivated what my life's task is, I'm not allowed to be introverted. I have to go out into the world and learn how other people live their lives. I have to be able to engage with people. I need to be gregarious. I need to be affable. And I need to be able to assert myself as this positive force to myself. When I actually started setting up my chess set in cafes and invited people to play with me, and now I also bring a deck of cards in case people don't know how to play chess. I've met a lot of really beautiful people. Yes, a lot of times I'll get someone who wants to proselytize or attempt to convert me to whatever it is that they truly believe is the right thing. More often than not, it's their own religion. But at the end of the day, I see the people's good intent and I genuinely appreciate their value and their insight, regardless if it comes from a place of sanctimonious nature or moral superiority. And there are many people who are very pious or showing a hypocritical display of virtue. And at the end of the day, I just want to be there for them. I want to be that ear that they can't communicate with, because it's a lot easier to talk to a stranger than it is a loved one or someone that you deeply respect, because with a stranger, you're not concerned about the collapse of the relationship, because your connection to me carries little weight or significance because we had just met. But if you build a long time rapport with someone, then saying something a little bit more contentious or controversial can be very damaging to that kind of relationship, which is terrifying to experience. So it was because of Man's Search for Meaning that I was able to cultivate what my life's task was and be able to go out and say, I want to be this connecting bridge. And with that vision, I was able to start being much more sociable and meet beautiful people in this world that I find to be very intriguing and dazzling and captivating. And it's helped me a lot in many other areas of my life, including working at a cafe and being sociable there and enjoying the process, finding a deep love and passion for the hobby of making coffee. I love making lattes at home. I love making latte art and steaming that milk just right, the puck preparation, ensuring that the espresso is just so good. and I love the process, and it's because of this vision that I was able to internalize as something deeply profound and moving to me, that I was able to move forward. And then I started reading books by Robert Greene, who is at the moment my favorite author to read. I read his 48 Laws of Power, which was talking a lot about how people play power games and how you can defend yourself against people who are playing power games against you. And from that point, I became even stronger as a person. I was able to deflect power games from people who were attempting to use them on me. I was able to utilize them in non-malicious ways, but in order to build strength and power for myself. And that felt extraordinarily reassuring. And then I read his most powerful book, to me personally, which is The Laws of Human Nature, which helped me understand the general basis of how human beings operate and the kinds of things that we all experience at some point, or the things that we're capable of experiencing, and illustrates them in a way that was easily digestible for me. I read the book twice, and each time I've read it, it was just extraordinarily impactful, and I absolutely loved it. It helps me so much in my conversations with people, and it makes me so happy to know that I'm growing as a person, that I'm becoming stronger and wiser as a person because of the experiences that I have with people. I feel so grateful to know that when I go out into the world, that I am actively engaging in my life's task, that I am going out and ensuring that my life's task is not an end goal. It's not something that can ever be completed. It's something that I can only ever make progress in. I switched from becoming a goal-oriented person, saying, this is my goal, and I'm going to work hard to achieve this goal. Okay, I've achieved the goal, now what? And I went from doing that to being a process-oriented person, relying on the process to carry me through life in a way that will lead me to the place that I want to be, which is not a place literally, but a place figuratively. A stronger, wiser, more compassionate person. A person who will not falter from his mission. A person who will not be crushed by other people or by uncontrollable circumstance. I will be strong in my own regard. And because of that, I've been able to detach myself from a lot of things in a really healthy way. I consider to be very healthy, which is, again, if everything and everyone in my life were to be gone, I want to know that I can depend on myself to not be crushed by that and to still view the world in a very beautiful way. Yes, the world itself is a very cruel and a very dark place, and it can lead to a monumental amount of tragedy and bereavement, etc. But within that darkness is tremendous beauty, and you have to be willing to look for it. Because in moments of true beauty, if you are just completely surrounded by darkness and you're only looking at the darkness, you're going to miss that beauty. And to be on the lookout for that beauty, to look at the small moments, like if I feel very stressed out and I have to go into work immediately, I'm going to take some time just to smell the flowers. Quite literally, just go out, smell some flowers that are next to my car, and just enjoy that present moment and recenter myself and just say, this is something beautiful that exists in the world that is here. And it's not going to be here year round, which is all the more reason why I can appreciate this moment for what it is, something truly beautiful. And I can say the same for the people that I've met, even the people who have proselytized me. I find that connection with a person truly inspiring and beautiful. And there's something that I can learn from everybody in the world and how they experience life in a way that's rich to them. So that way, when I engage with someone with antithetical views, I can ensure that I understand their opposing side's perspective and I'm able to communicate it in a way that isn't threatening because I don't belong to their tribe. And with that said, that absolutely comes with its pitfalls, of course. For me personally, this life that I live is not one of true neutrality because I still have my opinions about things, and there are elements of life in which I personally enjoy engaging with. But when it comes to so many differing perspectives in the world, that of which are completely tied to a person's ego or id or their persona or whatever it is, their character even, then I absolutely do my best to maintain this open worldview. I have met a lot of people, especially recently, who have said I am incredibly open-minded about things, and then I'll hear them completely badmouth the opposing tribe. And that's not very open-minded, if you ask me, because you're very loyal to your tribe and your tribe's values, which will declare open-mindedness, but you'll immediately become close-minded the moment the values of another tribe come into play. And that can be a very dangerous mentality because you're exposing your own hypocrisy openly. And trying to approach that can be very challenging in any key way because people, usually a part of that tribe, can become extraordinarily hostile and defensive because of that, and creating a rapprochement or the harmonious relationships between tribes becomes that much more difficult. But with that said, being able to come into a place of, wow, you aren't a part of this tribe, but we're actually having a conversation, even though you don't belong to my tribe, but you don't belong to my opposing tribe, you exist as this outside party who understands these views, my views and their views, and are able to tie knots and create bridges of more rapprochement, more of those harmonious relations. That's ultimately my goal. And again, the pitfalls are very dangerous in terms, like for me, the life I live right now is a very lonely one. Most of the people in my milieu or my social environment do belong not only to tribes, but are very forceful in how they express it. And with the way that I feel about certain elements, I try my best to take a Socratic view of my philosophy. And keep in mind that my personal philosophy is not any one particular thing. It's all of my life experiences. It's a bunch of things that I've read and picking out the certain elements and key points of which I think better construct me as a whole, which I think most people do, even if it's on a subconscious level. But for me personally, I'm a conglomerate or an amalgam of a variety of different points of wisdom which help guide me through to my ultimate destination, which is not a literal destination again, but the ultimate progress of my life's task. And being lonely in this path because I haven't met yet another person who doesn't belong to a tribe. People want to be accepted, people want to be liked, and I completely understand that. I want the same thing as well. But for me personally, again, the strength that I've built for myself and the life's task in which I've clearly defined for myself requires me to not join a tribe because I really don't want to join a tribe. Again, it's that Socratic view of when someone came to Socrates and said, Socrates, you are the wisest man in all of Greece. And he said, no, I'm not even maybe. And I'll prove it to you. So he goes out into Greece and asks all of these specialists about wisdom and about their field, and they can talk in great detail about their field and be very wise and experienced in their field, and he feels really confident. Socrates feels very confident about these people, and then the moment that he asks them about things outside of their field, they just start saying their opinions vehemently, ardently, and these opinions aren't necessarily based in reason or pragmatism, but more just based in society or more based in just emotional preference. And all of a sudden, they limit themselves down into this juvenile or even primal thinking of, I want to maintain the status quo in this area of my life, or I want to just be accepted in this area of my life, or I enjoy being the rebel in this area of my life even, and existing outside of the social norms. So eventually Socrates came back to the person who had praised him, extolled him even, and he just said, these people are specialists in their field, but true wisdom begins when you accept that you don't know everything about the world and the universe. The world is an extraordinarily complex and nuanced place, and everybody has an opinion about everything that's happening in the world because they just ask their morality, how do I feel about this? I don't feel good. This thing is evil. And you just put it in a box. You compartmentalize it. And it drives me nuts when people do that. Not to say that I'm not guilty of that as well, but I am much more self-aware of when that happens, and I always take a step back from it and reevaluate it. And that's something really important for me personally. But just to be able to go out and keep a true open mind about things and approach it with a certain level of excitement, of intrigue, to not assume the worst in that thing, and to engage with it on a way that you never expected to engage with it, to be able to go out with it and see, wow, this thing is really beautiful and not just something that I was conditioned to appreciate. An example of that on a much smaller scale is opera. A lot of people think opera is very dull and boring, but those same people have never experienced an opera live to begin with. They've probably never seen an opera online to begin with. Opera is, to me, very beautiful and very incredible because you're not just watching the absolute best of the best performing their art in front of you and putting their heart out to their audience, but there's incredible storytelling, incredible drama and comedy. There's a lot of really exciting things that are being pushed in the field of opera, especially right now, that can be so entertaining that people just don't give the chance to experience because of societal norms that it's boring or that their friend group wouldn't want to see it, so they have no reason to see it. So the point I'm trying to make is just the fact that even in the darkest times, even in the deepest pits of despair, you have control over yourself. You have control over your actions. And emotions will come and go like storm clouds. And, you can't control the weather, but there's this metaphor that I learned from author Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Righteous Mind. And It's an absolutely incredible book, and I heavily recommend it. But in that book, he painted a picture for me called The Rider and the Horse, although the horse is more later defined to be an elephant, where the rider, the person riding the animal, is your pragmatic mind, your ability to rationalize, to use logic. And the horse, or in this case, the elephant, is your emotional self, how you feel about things. So when you go out into the world and experience it for yourself, you are both, but the person leading you through that, or the entity leading you through that, is your emotions. The thing that's making you go is your emotions. And your pragmatism, your rational self, is guiding the elephant. You need both in order to create a harmonious relationship with yourself, to better understand others and other people's elephants and riders. And it's very difficult because at the end of the day, the rider isn't going to manually control the elephant. The elephant is going to go where the elephant wants to go. But the best you can do with your pragmatic mind is to clear obstacles in the way of your elephant, to build a strong rapport with your elephant so the elephant trusts you, the rider specifically, and you guys create this working relationship where you're feeding each other, where your emotions will not lead you astray down a dangerous path, but your pragmatism isn't completely depriving you of emotional fulfillment. That you both created this powerful rapport together where you both trust and depend on each other to ensure a happy, healthy, and fully fulfilled life. And I think that's the most anybody can ask of any one of us. And doing so is an extraordinary hard thing, but we do our best to do it. And if we can make it through a really dark time because we've developed the inner strength necessary to sit down with ourselves, to actually listen to what our dark thoughts are telling us, and to realize that these things aren't reasonable, that we are capable of growing beyond, that being stuck in a place of true despair is just a storm that will pass. I know for a lot of people the phrase, or rather the adage rather, that it gets better is cliche and hackneyed, but to be perfectly honest, it's not that I don't think it's cliche and hackneyed. It's very much overused, but the idea that something will last forever throughout the entirety of your life is complete BS. Everything in the world is ephemeral. If you create a differing mentality that not only registers with your pragmatic mind, but your emotional self, doing a lot of deep diving into who you are as a person, what it is you value, what it is you want to achieve in the world, how it is you're going to achieve it, and go out into the world and make that difference, even if it's an extraordinarily small one. Something that really deeply fulfills me is every so often I'm just going to go to a park, I'm going to put on some headphones, listen to an audiobook, and just pick up trash. I don't do it with a group of people. I don't do it to gain recognition. Because I'm just listening to the book. I'm just doing my own thing. And I'm doing something that I genuinely believe is helping the world, even on an incredibly small scale, which is just picking up trash at a park. And I'll do that for a couple of hours, and then the park will be a little bit cleaner because I was there to do that. And then I'll leave, and I'll just feel really good about that. Or if I was able to meet a couple of really interesting people playing chess, and they were able to express some deeper thoughts, philosophical thoughts, or just things that are troubling them, and they're venting to me about it, just being able to serve as that catalyst for them is a very fulfilling feeling for me. And the waves of life are going to take you up and down, and at the end of the day, it's enjoying the ride. It's being able to be present, enjoy the beauty of the moment. And there's a mantra that I learned in my first book that I never forgot because I just find it so simple yet so beautiful and easy to remember. I close my eyes, I sit up straight, I breathe in, and this breath, this specific breath, charges my entire body. There's this cool sensation that starts at my head and just trickles throughout my body. It creates an almost buzzing feeling of this cool veil, this cool veneer that just completely envelops my entire body. And when breathing in, I think, breathing in, I calm the mind. Breathing out, I smile. Dwelling in this present moment, I know this to be a beautiful moment, a wonderful moment. And that always helps me center myself again because I immediately snap back into what it is that I truly value about the world, which is that beauty, that inherent beauty that always lies within. And we become very gruff, and there are pangs of everything Machiavellian or darker and more cunning and more sinister in the world. And to be able to snap yourself back into the state of there might be a coarseness to people, there might be rigid edges, but underneath that rigidness is something beautiful. This person has lived their life up to this point, making key decisions for themselves to become something beautiful. And I think that that's magical. To be able to recognize that and not be so internalized about what is it that I could be doing to elevate myself and what is it that I should be doing to feel better and to not be in this pit of despair. Just to breathe and to center yourself and to come back in and to be in the state of I'm happy. A too long didn't read kind of version of this is when you find yourself in a pit of despair, tell yourself that you are strong enough to listen to your own thoughts and actually do it. Listen to how dark your thoughts are and realize your thoughts are just thoughts. That when you go out into the world and actually engage with something beautiful, recognize it as beautiful. When you engage with something ugly, recognize it as the potential for something beautiful. And don't exist in a world of delusion. Don't tell yourself that, oh, because this person is really mean to me that I can make them into something beautiful. No, people are going to be who they are. And it's not up to you to change someone. So if you see a person who is really sinister and very malicious and doing awful things to other people, the onus isn't on you to try to fix that person, but rather view that person with eyes of compassion, that that person has probably experienced an extraordinarily challenging life with very tough decisions and nuanced decisions, and that person just kept making the wrong decisions or decisions that ultimately led to their own self-destruction. And to feel the compassion for that person and lead your life by example, I think is a very powerful way to live life. It's, again, not the only way, and there are plenty of people who live their life in very other ways that are also extraordinarily successful. This is just how I engage with life in a way that's really powerful and moving to me. And just being able to exist in that space, to see the world beautifully and not completely surrounded by darkness all the time, thinking, wow, people are just going to use me and abuse me, and even the people that I deeply love and truly respect are going to betray me. No, no. It does come to a point where I have a very small friend group, and everybody else that I meet in my life are colleagues or acquaintances. It takes a great deal to become a friend of mine. Because to become a friend to me means if they call you at 2 in the morning needing something, you're going to pick up. You are there. You are present. Being a friend is a full-time job, and you need to be there. And that's what being a friend is, or rather an element of what it means to be a friend. And the fact that my friend group is so diverse in how they engage with the world, in their beliefs, in everything, and I can still see the beauty in them is something that I wasn't able to do before. And the fact that I have the group that I have now and is growing progressively just assures me that the path that I'm on is right for me. I'm able to coexist with the darkness that exists within me, my shadow self, if you will. And it's not that I try to eradicate this side of myself. Everybody has a dark side of themselves, whether they choose to admit it or not. But it's just coming to a point where we all struggle with varying elements in life, and we all handle it very differently. And some people are very successful in how they handle it, and some people aren't. And we just have to do the best we can to learn from our mistakes and grow. And when we find ourselves with a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, we have to figure out ways in which we can overcome that obstacle. I know for a lot of people, pursuing power sounds very sinister and malicious, but if there's an obstacle in front of you and it keeps beating you down, you're going to need a certain level of strength and power to overcome that obstacle. And there's going to be times when you might not want to engage with that side of you, but it's a part of you. You know, we're all capable of producing not just great good and great evil, but producing things that are genuinely good for ourselves that might serve to the detriment to someone else, but it's not going to be crushing for them, and it helps you overcome your own challenges. I was reading Abraham Lincoln's biography, and one of the quotes that was recalled of him saying, which is, in politics, you're very rarely ever going to encounter something that is purely good or purely evil. Rather, you choose the road that is the most good while accepting the certain level of evil that comes from it. And instead of painting it as a picture of good versus evil, it's taking the pith of that, which is accept the corollaries of your actions and do your best to reason out what actions are best for you, what actions help those closest to you, but ultimately putting yourself as the priority because you can't help other people if you yourself are a mess. And being able to go out into the world, promote yourself, make yourself strong, more capable, more grounded, and ensure that your goal at the end of the day is to help yourself become better so you could better help your environment by leading by example, by inspiring the people closest to you through your actions. And to be able to be so strong in your own capacity through such means is something that has moved me deeply in my life so far. And I have the rest of my life to keep learning and keep growing. Some of these views are absolutely subject to change, but my foundations and my goals have been and will remain consistent. And just to be able to keep an open mind and to engage with the world in a way that is unfettered and free, and just to be extricated from the shackles of your own depression, your own anxieties, your own circumstances that are either within or outside of your control, but just being able to choose to do better. And for me, I needed the absolute kick in my butt from my ex-girlfriend to completely destroy me and to become an empty shell, just so I could come to this realization that I can be better. I deserve better and I want better. And when I made that mentality, I created a better relationship with a person who cares deeply about me. I was able to go out into the world and meet beautiful people. I was able to secure a better job. I was able to create a better attitude towards that job. I was able to start learning and growing myself so much more personally. I was able to do things that truly fulfilled me in ways that I never could have imagined before because I was too caught up in my own depression and despair. So, am I where I expected to be 10 years ago in my life? No. But I'm in a place that's so much more fulfilling and beautiful. And I know that if I keep trusting and improving my process, then I know I'm going to be fine. And I know the people around me are going to be fine. And we're all just doing the best we can with what we got to see how other people engage with life, whether it's destructive or genuinely good or anything in between. There's always going to be nuance into the results of people's actions. And I will never know that nuance unless I talk deeply about each person's full life story, which none of us are going to do in our lives. So, it's that adage, you never know what someone is experiencing in their life, whether it's positive or negative or neutral, and just engaging with it with a little bit of compassion and internal strength to not be wavered by their energy, whether it's overly optimistic and quixotic or extremely detrimental and suffocating. So just to be able to have a certain level of detachment, but have a ton of empathy and compassion and inner strength and power, being able to engage with life in a way that's meaningful and find that catalyst that really gets you moving, that really creates that strong rapport with your emotional self and your pragmatic self and your shadow side as well. Just combining all of these entities, all of you that makes you you, the recognition of some of your dark qualities, of your beautiful qualities, and present that out. I think that's what it's about. I'm not perfect by any means. I still make a ton of mistakes that Carrie is able to present for me when I'm not able to catch myself in the moment of it. And I do my best, she does her best, we all do our best, and just to engage with each other and confront each other with some compassion and beauty. I think that's what it's all about. I really do. Because the moment that we can actually learn from each other and bounce ideas off of each other instead of responding with hostility and defensiveness, because the moment one person responds with defensiveness, another person becomes defensive, and then there's just no more conversation. So just being able to say, this is where I lie, and I'm curious to learn what you think, and not come from a place of intensity or personal bias, but even though you can absolutely have your own bias and preference towards things, but genuinely taking real concern and real interest in another person's view about the world, there can be something deeply insightful that might even change you through reflection. So, the goal of a conversation isn't to change someone to your side or convince them to come to your tribe. It's to better understand them. It's to better understand what makes them a beautiful and unique person. And if there's something really insightful that inspires you, go ahead and write it down or internalize it in a way that's really beautiful and allow yourself to grow from it. Even if it's just a one time thing where you meet that person, allow yourself the opportunity to grow, to develop. And don't be so obstinate. Allow yourself the opportunity to grow, to become stronger, powerful. Don't fear becoming more powerful. Don't fear becoming stronger. I've noticed that the weak truly have strength in numbers and promote weakness. So, can you imagine what would happen if the strong came together and promoted strength? If there's so much strength and weakness, can you imagine the strength that would come together through everybody coming together, bouncing ideas off of each other, creating this inner strength that just blossoms out into a massive progression of society in a way that helps benefit most people, in a way that allows us to flourish because we're building ourselves as individuals who are cooperating extraordinarily well in a society because we're taking into each other's viewpoints without being hostile towards them, and we're able to experience the world in a way that's rich and unique. And if there are some viewpoints that are very destructive and they themselves are sharing it, then it's not necessarily your place to completely crush their worldview, because that's not going to lead anywhere. They're just going to develop a resentment towards you for trying to crush their world. But to rather listen to them, understand where they're coming from, make sure that you express your view since they had the opportunity to express theirs. And if the goal is to genuinely enrich each other, understand the pitfalls that they may have experienced and not tell them directly you've been trapped in a pitfall, but understand internally this is where they fell into this pitfall. And this is something for me to watch out for. So I appreciate this conversation I'm having with them, that kind of thing. So, all in all, that's my story. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any of your own stories, I would love to hear them. And if you guys had any disagreements or points of contention within my story, I'd also love to hear that and have a respectful conversation about it. And I'm also going to have a live stream once a month to make sure that we talk about anything said here or in other videos. And I just want to appreciate all of you for being here, listening to this video. It means so much to me that you guys are here, especially in this new format. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night, everyone.